Yo,
Yeah.
welcome to another episode of the Love Podcast. I'm here with Lester, one of my good friends from Puerto Viejo. You know what? I just took a tour of his property. Amazing. This is a river right behind where he lives. And, this place is fabulous, man.
Yeah, man.
This place is really nice. You're doing your thing. I got to give you your flowers. This is a really nice property. But yeah, so I wanted to touch base. He's one of my good friends here. He's really into evolution. He's into sound healing. He's into all types of different healing modalities. And so I wanted to just touch base with him on, his early part of his life, all the things that actually brought him to moving to Costa Rica and helping everybody heal themselves with sound and and just start off like that. Just, when you were younger, can you take us to your early part of your life, where you're from, and then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, so I grew up in Virginia, and I grew up in the mountains of Virginia, and it was a really teeny small town. Got to have the beauty of growing up in community where all the neighbors would have our gardens, people would cook together and hang out and just kind of kick it. And yeah, and so I spent a lot of time in nature growing up, swimming, playing in rivers and lakes, and climbing trees, and yeah, and just developed a deep connection with nature through that. I remember my father taking me around. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and him teaching me how I had nothing to fear. I didn't have to be so afraid when I was out there. That if I respected nature, it would respect you. And yeah, and that began the journey of me just running through the forest for my whole childhood, just playing with my imagination and playing different games, pretending that way.
And you were only child?
It's kind of yeah. So I have a sister and a brother, but we have like half siblings. So we have like a same dad, different mom, same mom, different dad type deal. And so I'd see them every now and then, and I would spend time. Because my whole family was on that mountain, and so I'd like run around with my cousins at times, but also spent a lot of my time just kind of on my own, wandering through the forest. Really, yeah, and developed like a deep connection with nature because of it, because I wasn't always there with
using your imagination.
Yeah, and like checking out all the leaves and making potions just from things I'd find outside, and just kind of
crazy,
and having fun with it. So
potions.
Yeah, yeah. I'd just take and like mix different things, and then I'd bring it home, and my dad would pretend to try it, and like something would happen to him.
Nice.
And then later that came around, and I started getting into making tinctures and doing stuff with herbalism. So it's kind of.
So how would you know? Like back then, it was your imagination.
Yeah, back then it was completely my imagination, and I was just playing games, and would just kind of make whatever.
And now it's cool. A part of your life.
Like, yeah, I'd like throw a little bit of mud and like crush this leaf up and like a couple stones and shake it all together. And
nice.
Yeah.
So tell me about your the early part of your life, like in school and things of that nature. Were you always into sound and healing and music in the early part of your life, or is that something that developed later on?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I would always run around in the mountains and I would sing, but I never thought anything of it. And then my uncle really listened to a lot of soul and Motown and oldies. Like I really learned to sing from Motown a lot. Like I was really big into the Temptations, but then also loved like Michael Jackson and kind of Smokey Robinson and Sam Cooke and stuff like that. And then also elements of like Roy Orbison and Elvis and stuff. And then yeah, but then didn't really get into music and think anything of it until like middle school. I was in choir, and that's where I first learned to sing properly. So using diaphragmatic breathing into the belly, and how to raise your soft palate, and how to do it all correctly.
Exactly.
Because I remember watching one of the artists, Little Anthony and the Imperials. I watched one of their concerts later when they were like in their 70s or 80s, and the guy's voice was much richer and better because he was singing properly.
Oh.
And it was funny because I learned all of those basics and how to do it, and then later in like high school and like later parts of middle school I was getting more into rock music, and I loved a lot of those singers, but it was fascinating because a lot of those singers didn't sing properly, and so you would look at them later in life and they weren't able to do what they were able to do
When you
before.
mean properly, like what is that? Because I don't know, I'm not a singer,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but like, how do you sing properly? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so it all starts with the breath, which is everybody should be breathing this way. You'll be a much happier human being. Is when you breathe, you want to breathe into your belly. Like when you breathe in, your belly goes out. When you breathe out, the belly goes in. Instead of doing the like
Into your lungs.
breathing up here into your chest and you're raising your shoulders, because when you do that, that it constricts and it makes it harder for the sound to escape. But also too, when you're like running from something, you're more in the fight or flight. It's like the you're more up there. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're breathing into the belly, it's a much fuller breath and you're coming from a much more grounded place.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so learning how to like sing properly has made like a big shift, because I saw the difference of like artists that I grew up on that I loved that would sing properly and good use good tonality, and then also like the rock artists that would sing amazing stuff but weren't doing it correctly, so they lost their voice with time.
Oh.
And so it was cool being able to like go into that world of rock and all these different things, but use that approach of singing properly, and was able to really grow and stretch my voice in different ways that I never would have learned how to do. And yeah, I owe a lot to my middle school choir teacher, Miss
Wow.
Fagan. Like she really, if I didn't learn what I did with her, like I wouldn't be who I am today.
Exactly.
And so yeah, and that just kind of, that's when I started getting into singing and getting into music. And I went through high school and these different things, but I didn't really get into art, like looking at music as an art form, until I was 17. And I remember just laying down one day and just feeling so depressed and like so intense and being like, fuck, well, like, why do I feel like this? Like when I was a
But
kid,
it
I
was
was
for no
so,
reason though.
it was for a lot of reasons. And it was
Like reasons
really,
like what?
yeah, so like I was thinking back to when I was a kid, I was super happy running around in the forest and all of these different things, and using my imagination and climbing trees and having that connection with nature and myself. And at that point when I was 17, I remember like kind of right after hitting puberty and getting into middle school, that's when you learn you got to be like cool and all these things, and you
And mature.
kind of, yeah,
And
you got to
playing
learn,
isn't really mature anymore.
yeah, stuff like that. And also too, people kind of think it's weird, and you get into other different things and you start getting into like partying and yeah, and it really, I don't know, like essentially kind of lost myself and my essence and my roots, and kind of played the game of society for a good long while. And then around 17, I just didn't feel good. Like the life that I had when I was close to nature and like doing my passions and the stuff that was like deep in my heart, that's when I was happiest.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was doing what society and like school and all these things were telling me I was supposed to do, then it like, yeah, all of that happiness slowly started to go away. And so when I was 17, I was thinking about that, and I was like, when I was a child, I was so happy and had like so many things. I was in that state of awe and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at 17 that I decided to reclaim my imagination and start doing those things that I loved doing as a child. And so I started climbing trees again. I started running around in the forest and exploring and just using my imagination. And I started to like make art. I
Mm-hmm.
started painting. I started crafting, doing dream catchers and making stuff with my hands. And yeah, and that's when music and singing was a thing that I always did, but I never looked at it as an art form in a way to like really express.
What did you?
There's like a quote that it's a story about how when Bob Dylan first met the Beatles, and the Beatles were all excited. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna meet Bob Dylan," and they're talking to him, and Bob Dylan tells them, he's like, "Yeah, you guys are cool, but why don't you like actually sing about something that's real?" Because before it was like, "I want to hold your hand," and it was all about love and romance and girls and just kind of this world that we're always kind of pulled into through media.
Yeah.
And that's when they started to branch out and to explore. And before that point, before 17, all of my music was about like kind of girls and all these different things and like ego based and like, look
Yeah.
how I'm the fucking shit and like
Yeah.
all this
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
like I was really groomed to like do that rock star life. And when I started doing that and I started partying and like chasing a lot of women and doing all these things, it really left me feeling empty.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started to reclaim my imagination and to dive into those true fulfillments instead of the false fulfillments of things of like partying all the time, climbing a social ladder and like trying to like follow this illusion, it really made a big difference. And then my lyrics changed. I
Yeah.
started writing about the connection to nature and realizing that there's like a beautiful path within, and also realizing that which we're apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it started coming from a much deeper place. And so that really, just changed it all for me.
And so when you reclaimed, basically your childhood, happiness, like at age 17, around that time, what were your other friends thinking that you were hanging out with that were doing the other adult things? And
Yeah, so that's a really,
because I know like in high school, that's when, for me personally, like that's when the bullies come out.
yeah,
That's when
exactly.
the
Yeah.
like how are you dressing comes out, and who are you hanging with, and what kind of car are you driving. So to go back to being, like a kid again and doing like these nature things at that age, that's not cool anymore.
Yeah. And
You know,
that's exactly what I was talking about. And that's really, I mean, yeah, it brings up so many kind of things when you bring that up because, yeah, we learn to be cool.
yeah, we learn to be
And what is
cool.
that? Like, where does that even fucking come from? It's like cool is being able to like have a connection with nature and knowing how to
You know
live
what's
in
funny,
harmony
man,
with it. Like,
is that not at this age, at this stage of my life, I've gone through like a timeline of what I thought was cool and
mm-hmm.
what all my friends thought was cool, right?
Yeah.
And then the money chase,
Yeah.
of like,
No,
oh,
that's a
I got to
big one.
get all this money and do all these things and build my social status and do all these things. And now that I'm here, a lot of my friends that are, my age are looking at what I'm doing. And at the beginning, they're probably like, this guy's crazy. And now they're thinking, wow, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now you're
Exactly.
getting back because you did what you thought was cool. You're like, this ain't fucking cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of
And
cool.
and it takes a lot of bravery to like walk away from that because I don't know what it was like for you, but because at 17 was when I kind of saw all of this and really was just starting to shy away and get away from the partying and all these things. And I started spending a lot more time alone. And one of my friends, he was a Lakota Indian, and we went to school together all through like high school. And him and I actually started sleeping out in the woods together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when like I got really weird and there started to be a huge gap between my friends and I.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I started sleeping in the woods and started really diving deep into my art and diving deep into like there's something way more than just this physical reality that we
Mm-hmm.
experience. And I had a really amazing time period where I spent like a couple years just pretty much living only in the forest,
That's
sleeping on the ground.
crazy.
And it was the best time period of my life. I remember when I was 19 was the most like tuned in I've ever been in my life.
What was that
And
from? What do you think that was just from being out in nature,
it was it was
having a
kind of
peace of mind? Like what?
it
Like
was a being away from the distractions. So like I was talking about, it's like here I don't want Wi-Fi. That's such a like it's a trap. It's a tool and it can be a good tool, but it's a very much a distraction. And our society is very much set up to keep us distracted. Because if you're out here finding fulfillment and all these things, and I need this and I need more money, it's constant hamster wheel. But when you're going inward, it starts to change a lot. I remember reading a quote in this book called The Tao of Parenting, and it said, if you raise a child to be successful, they'll never be content. But if you raise a child to be content, success and happiness will follow them wherever they go. So when you're out there chasing success, you're always going to have that hole. And I remember having that hole, and I remember the first time in my life ever feeling that hole like disappearing, and I was like, whoa, what the fuck? And it's because I was always chasing that
yeah,
thing.
that's so true because I felt similar when I actually moved here. I felt like the life that I was living was always more and more and more and more.
Yeah,
Everybody wants more. Everybody wants a raise. Everybody wants a new car. Everybody wants this. As soon as you get money, you want to do this, and it's really for other people.
yeah,
You know, to like show other people that, oh, look what I have. You know, this is what success is based upon.
yeah,
And so I was thinking, like, what's wrong with being content? Like they use content as a negative. Like,
yeah,
oh, you're just content. You know how many marriages break up because, oh yeah, you're just content, man. You didn't want to grow
yeah,
financially, or you didn't want more. So like, oh yeah, you're not motivated.
yeah.
It's like, what's wrong with just being like, I am fine
Yeah,
where I am.
yeah. If you're comfortable and you're happy, because that success is different for everybody. But for me, it's very much like a level of success is like if you have food, you have shelter, you've got clean water, and you've got a close friend group and family.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're connected to nature. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't need all the like having a bunch of people like you, all of this shit. Like it's so shallow. And it's
Yeah.
like I went through that period of like having a lot of friends and being popular, and then when I started getting into this, I realized it's like, oh, those people weren't actually friends. Because later, after going through that period and being 19 and going through those couple years of living in the forest and then going back to my old friends and trying to like share with them and express to them about this amazing stuff that really brought so much more substance to my life, it hurt because they laughed at me and they really like fucking picked on me, and it was kind of like, yeah, it's like being kind of stabbed in the
Yeah,
heart, and it
that's
like
crazy.
the people that you think are your friends and you kind of go around, it's really like people are only ready when they're ready.
Yeah, I remember like the joke in my little group chats sometimes when somebody was trying to like make fun of me or something. They're like, "Oh, shut up, coconut boy. Go eat some coconuts."
Yeah,
Like that was like a joke, and I'm just like, you know, people. Yeah, I mean, it's just like almost like brainwashed.
yeah,
You know, it's almost brainwashed to make people think that. And you know, and I'm still in there. I'm like 80-20. Like I'm like 80% here, but then I have like my 20% where I want my Jordans. I
yeah,
want my little, you know, I
yeah.
want
You
my
gotta
like
want to
cool
look fresh,
stuff.
man.
I'm not all the way there, but you know, it's a process,
Yeah,
you know. But man, that sucks, man. You know that you try to express yourself to your friends and like because they're brainwashed on what they think is cool and who's the cool guy and the cool girls, then they frown upon somebody who's really just trying to be in the essence of nature and growth.
yeah, and being what it is to actually be human and live.
And so your friend that you went, you know, where you were camping out with and that he was doing that because you guys just like, you know what, let's just do this, or like how did that come about?
Well, to be just very like frank about it, it's like we all like I had a lot of beautiful things in my childhood, especially when I was living with my father, but we both also dealt with like a lot of really heavy shit.
Mm-hmm.
And
Heavy stuff like what? Would not
yeah,
get not to
like I
get too
mean,
far into it, but like what could be something that would push you to to that point where you're like, I just want to get away and just, do my own thing?
Yeah, like, yeah, him and I, we just kind of couldn't always like fit into society fully because one, we hadn't like had no concept of how to like process and communicate and talk about trauma
Mm-hmm.
and get through it. But it's really like we were just kind of over everything, and like nature was where it like
Yeah.
felt the most real,
Uh-huh.
and being in all these things, and that's where like stuff started to finally come up and stuff started healing and starting to like feel things where
Mm-hmm.
usually it's like, no, just get high and fucking like get drunk and you don't have to feel that
That's
shit
what
anymore.
everybody does.
Yeah, and it's like, no, you gotta, if you're stuffing stuff, if you have all this stuff trapped in your body and this like tension and this dis-ease in your body, if you hold that dis-ease in your body long enough, eventually that dis-ease turns into disease.
I think a lot of people pacify the disease and the trauma and the confusion, with happy hour,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Friday,
exactly.
just getting fucked up, smoking some weed, doing some drugs to change the chemical makeup of your body to where you're numbing
Yeah,
all the things that are going on
yeah,
in
man.
your life. And that's what causes stress. That's what causes diseases. That's what causes temper tantrums, different things like anxiety, because you're just like, you're so wound up.
Yeah. And it just makes all that stuff that you're running from even worse. And it gets harder and it gets uglier. And it's just because then you're adding layers on top of this stuff that you've already stuffed down. And then you're creating new traumas and like fucked up stuff because you're getting drunk and then you're doing something that you didn't really like
Mm-hmm.
want to do. And like, it's
Exactly.
just, yeah. And it's like such a cycle that they get human beings in
Oh man, and
because
it's almost like they turn human beings with this lifestyle that is cool into cancer for the planet and for others that are trying to, live more in tune with nature and be
Mhm.
more creative and do these things. They turns it into a cancer because then they want to suck you back into their world. Like,
Yeah,
no, that's weird. Come do this, because then we'll be your friends. Then you'll be cool.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, nah, like I don't feel that. Like, you're lucky because you were able to tap in at 17. You were able to somehow tap into this isn't right. Some people, it takes years and years and years, man, and they're just traumatized to the extreme. And then they're
yeah,
like, man, damn, now I got cancer, and something happens to where like it forces them there.
yeah.
You willingly said, you know what, I'm taking this path.
Well, it's crazy because like I started that path and it was the most real thing I'd ever experienced in my life. Like I was following the full path of my heart and like digging, trying to go in deeper and seeing what's in there and what
Mm-hmm.
is all of this. And I went from the most happy and open, connected place I'd ever been. So when I went back to my friends and tried to like share it and like share that gift, I went to the most closed and bitter and resentful and angry place I'd ever been. And I actually never drank before in my life, and I started drinking because my mom drank a lot. I just didn't want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was just like hurting so much, and I was like, well, fuck it. Like, if my world is like that I found is so crazy, not right, and I need to do these things, and having pressures from my uncle, I then decided I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna like stop this path of my heart, and I'm gonna do what's expected of me, and like
This
live
is
that life.
after you were living in the
Yeah,
forest.
after living in the forest, and so yeah, like started going to school and like trying to do computer engineering and like all of this stuff and having a normal job. And more, it's like I just got disconnected from my heart and from my soul, and like I started drinking a lot. I started blacking out all the time, and really just got to like a really dark place in my life that I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
But the seed only sprouts in the darkness. And going through that place really made me appreciate what I found when I was like 17 to 19 living in the forest And it now gave me the strength to where it's like I don't need that validation anymore. It's like I can go to somebody and I don't even have that, like, I don't need to express these things and try to like convert people and be like, oh, but this is the way.
Yeah.
It's like everybody has their own path.
Yeah, for sure.
And now I'm like just starting to get back into some of the things that I was getting into then. And it took me many years to kind of get back. Like for the first time in my life, I can say that I'm like 100% like sitting in the middle of the path of my heart and like fully embodied like what I'm wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now I just have to like stay centered and keep doing it and
For
giving
sure.
and
You're
feeding
doing, yo,
myself love and growing.
you're doing good, bro.
Yeah, thanks,
You're
man.
doing good. After I seen this property, you're doing just
I
fine,
appreciate it,
man.
man. And but yeah, like it's really, I don't know, like it feels good to kind of finally be back to this place, but to go through all of that shit, to go through the like what they call Maya and kind of like Hinduism, go through the illusion and go through the world and experience it, to like grow up as a child, feel that beautiful essence of nature, but not have like the kind of the full awareness of being an adult. And then coming to 17, 18, 19, 20, and like getting like a full wide open glimpse of, yeah, there is much more than this physical realm. I
Mm-hmm.
remember I was always pushing, trying to find like there's got to be something different, and then it's like found a thin point in the veil.
Where would, yeah,
And
what was that? What do you mean when you say thin point in the veil? Can you elaborate? Like,
so yeah, like it's and it's interesting because now I'm starting to dive more into this stuff again. It took me a little while to like feel comfortable to go back there again because I had such a hang up around it and trauma from like sharing it with people. But so I'd literally would wake up, and at 19 was the deepest moment for me. And like 17, 18 was just living in the forest. So like hitchhiked Greyhound across the US, sleeping outside all around the US. And then when I was 19, I'd sleep outside most of the time. But at that point, I had an art studio where I had all my music gear, and I'd wake up and I'd immediately go and start playing.
mm-hmm.
And it was on my family's property, like my uncle's property. And so I'd play till I got hungry, and then I'd eat, and then I'd go back and start playing. And that's when the first time stuff just started pouring out and kind of hit that like flow state or channeling. And it's weird, I don't like calling it channeling, but things would just be coming out, and I would put no mental thought into it and being like, it should be this. It was
And we're
just
just,
pouring out. And
yeah.
so, and I would do that from when I would wake, eat, and then go until it would get dark, and then I couldn't be loud anymore. And then I started, that's when I was really getting into meditation. And that was also the time period that I started getting into telepathy and learning about astral projection. That's when I started doing lucid dreaming. I started lucid dreaming not intentionally. I started a dream journal where I would write down my dreams
Mm-hmm.
and I'd wake up, and then it got to a point to where when I'd fall asleep, I'd be in my dream, and it started to be like, oh wait, I'm dreaming right now, and I could start to control what was going on.
Whoa.
And it got to this weird place to where when I was going to sleep, it was like I was getting ready to wake up.
No
and
way.
and there's a very like, we can do a lot in
So
the dream world.
you were like, so when you were falling asleep, you knew you were falling asleep,
I knew I was falling
and
asleep.
it's like, and then you could control what was going on in the
Yeah,
dream.
to a very like, yeah, lucid dreaming is powerful.
Yeah,
But
that's
the thing
crazy.
that's so wild is that you're also like able to, all the stuff that's in your subconscious mind, like you can heal so much in that state. You can also go into theta state and all these other things without going to sleep and work through this stuff as well. And that's what's been really beautiful about getting into the like the sound journey work and the crystal bowls and doing all of that. And because you can go into those states as well. But it's been interesting kind of looking at the stuff that I used to do 19, just intuitively, and kind of felt it, to now coming back around and being like, oh well, holy shit. Like I remember I used to do this thing where I would like breathe in, and as soon as I would breathe out, I would feel like my consciousness gets smaller, and I'd visualize stuff, and I'd like breathe in, I'd get smaller, smaller, until, and I don't know why, I would always just like, this is just what I would like come up with. I would like go into the base of a tree, and I would go into this hole, and I'd like kind of walk through a tunnel and come out on like another side to this other place. And it blew my mind when I was first reading this book called Plant Spirit Medicine by Elliot Cohen. And it's not a book about ayahuasca or stuff like that. It's a book that talks about the process that indigenous use to connect with the spirit realm. And later, when I was reading this book, he explained this process of doing the shamanic drum and doing it at a certain BPM to take you into that kind of shamanic state, into that like theta brainwave state where you could start doing this journeying. And he explained that you would go into the base of a tree, and you'd go into this tunnel, and you'd come out to the light to the other side, and you were then in the spirit realm, and you could connect and learn from the plants and learn what they're good for. And when I started reading this, like it gave me goosebumps.
So you were doing this before you read the book?
Before I even read the book.
Crazy.
And really, because that's the thing, is that we have all this deep memory within us. And that's the key, to me, the key reason why we have so many distractions. Because if you're distracted and you're always searching for more and trying to like get this thing so that you can be whole and all this shit, you're not going inward and really like tuning into your internal wisdom that we all have. And there's a voice and there's a thing that's deep inside within all of us that will give us all the answers when you follow your intuition. And so in that period, like I would literally just go on these journeys where I would just start walking in the forest and something would be like, go to the left. But I was planning to go to the right. My mind was like, oh yeah. But I went to the left. And I would like end up in all these situations where when I followed my intuition 100% and was just completely out of the brain for a long time and like not using a cell phone, a lot of like really profound, amazing things happen. And the deepest experience that happened while doing that. And it's funny to share this, because this will be the first time I've ever shared this in like a public way. Like you're gonna have this online, but that's the thing. I'm not afraid of those, like the laughter and the people being like this stiff anymore. There is no laughter.
Like, this shit is real.
It is real.
People need to hear what's really going on.
And so, one of the most like powerful moments of my life was when I was doing that, and I was at this festival, and it was interesting because it was at a time period where I didn't want to do any substances. I was very much in the place that we can get to any state of consciousness through meditation. And it was amazing because I went to this festival and something was telling me, it was just, my intuition was pulling me into the wilderness. There was no trail, there was nothing. And I was just like, yeah. And I just started walking and following it. And next thing I know, I walk up onto this secret stage. And this guy, this speaker, was holding a think tank. And I remember it was the first time in my life that I'd ever heard anybody speaking verbally about all the things that I'd been experiencing while living in the forest, and like starting to feel these things and starting to experiment and kind of like search in this world. I had no clue what I was like, what doors were opening, like the astral projection and all the lucid dreaming and all this stuff. And it was the first time that I'd ever heard anybody speaking about this. And I remember feeling this like sensation of like energy and excitement and like this vibration just like getting more and more. And I'm sitting there listening, and this energy is building up, and it's kind of going and going and going until like next thing I know, I wasn't seeing the physical world, and in this physical world like we usually experience it. And it was kind of like when Neo first saw the Matrix. He wasn't seeing the physical form, he was seeing the energy patterns within it all. And this man was like these waves of light, and I could see that it was a human being. And I was looking around, and the few people that were around in the seminar, they all had like different colors. The trees had all, it was just all energy for him. And I was in this place of awe for a moment, and I was just sitting there looking around. And as soon as I thought, what is this? As soon as I brought the mind in, it snapped back out, and I was like, whoa, what the fuck was that? And didn't really know what to do with that. And so I just kind of like tucked it away for a little while. And then, and like I was saying, I tried to share this stuff with old friends, but I started having new types of people just pop up through these intuitive wanderings, through like kind of going through a town and different things. I'd meet these different figures that were kind of like messengers or like angels that would pop up and being like, hey, you're on the right path. Keep following your heart. And but at that time, like I needed that like validation and the things of like, yeah, like the assurance from other people. And so I didn't have enough of those being like, you're doing the right thing, and there was too many of the like, oh, you're crazy. And but one of those people that I met in that time period, they were kind of laughing, and they were like, oh, you're like essentially tapping into, and I'm gonna tread lightly in this subject because there's a lot of
all the way in.
Well, it's funny because there's a lot of like the people that like talk about like 5D and all of this, like I feel like a lot of the new age stuff is also another hamster wheel that's been created for us. So you have the ideology of like climbing that ladder of success and you're never fulfilled. Then some people see through that, and there's another hamster wheel created for them. There's the like the illusion of obtaining enlightenment or these different things, and it's all about keeping us in that state of like going, trying to find and obtain this like level. And there's also the people that have the like the 5D, like, oh, I want to achieve this thing so that I can like reach 5D or like get into heaven and these different things. And it's very like the whole new age world is very deeply rooted in a lot of the Theosophical Society and the teachings of H.P. Blavatsky and all of these different things. And when you really dive deep into that world, you see that it's an intense thing. And that can be for like another conversation that goes, it's super heavy. But it's so important to not get sucked into those traps and those hamster wheels of that thing of being like, you need something that is outside of yourself. Now, it is very true that we need community and we need connection in these different things, and like working together, you need nature. This is all outside of ourselves. But the key thing for me that I've found is like really tuning in deeply and realizing that there's something deep inside of all of us that when we go and we fucking go and dig through all the like the dark pain, all these different things that are deep inside of us, when you get to your true core and your essence, there is like an unshakable force within us that it's like we're infinite beings. Like this body is only a temporary vessel.
For sure.
But it's like when you start to tap in deep, you start to like find that thing that is much deeper than ourselves and that part of us that is eternal. and we've got all the answers that we really need. It's like it was really interesting coming back around and kind of coming full circle and being like, oh, like what you were doing intuitively was something that's been done for like many
Yeah,
many
that's
years.
crazy. That's crazy.
And that was just like one example. Like all this stuff that just really, when we follow our intuition, it leads you to exactly where you need to be.
So, what was the most
And
profound experience that you had when you were like going to the base of the tree and coming out? Like, what can you give me any examples of something that you were like, whoa, like I was, in a dream and I did this and I came back, like, like,
so I used to, the most profound experience doing that was literally just like a couple months ago. And to backtrack, before I didn't really know what I was doing. And I was just kind of going there. I would have these moments where I'd like sit, I'd close my eyes, and then
meditating.
I would go on these like journeys visually.
But you would be meditating, like with the intention of meditation.
I wouldn't be like, okay, I'm gonna sit and do this breath work. I would just sit there. So it's clairvoyancy, like clear vision. I remember learning this thing to where what you would do is you'd close your eyes, you'd get centered, and you would imagine a rose. And you would imagine, like within your mind's eye, you would imagine that rose, and you would imagine feeling that rose just kind of in circular motion, cleaning the inside of your head and just going down and going through and just feeling that rose kind of like cleaning all through your body and going all the way down into the bottom of your feet and just cleaning your whole body. And for me, that, like, I felt amazing after that. And that opened a lot. I was like, well, that was just my mind and visualization, and that made a huge difference in how I felt. And I remember like feeling a pain. It was kind of like in this area. And I remember I was like, okay, well, I'm going to like go to that pain. And I remember like visualizing and kind of like with the rose, and I went to that, and I remember pushing that pain, and I remember feeling it traveling down and going down my legs and then out the bottom of my foot, and it was gone. And that's when I first started learning about the visualization. And then I started doing things to where if I would have like a pain or a certain thing, I would visualize it as like a brick wall. And I would visualize it crumbling and just going away. And that made a huge difference. And we have layers of stuff that we're holding on to, so of course like certain things would come up again, and I'd have to like redo the visualization. Some people will do it as like taking like a piece of paper, writing all their things and burning it in a fire,
Yeah.
letting it go. But then it got to a point to where I was like, well, I want to like see where this goes. And so I'd like start visualizing, and I'd go on these journeys. And I remember one thing I used to love doing, I would always end up on this like, I'd go to this like kind of to the ocean, and there were like a bunch of like boulders and rocks around, and I would always meet this old man there, and I would just sit down and like talk to this old man. And when I was there, I was like very much there. I was no longer like here, I was just deep in it, and I would talk with this old man, and then like I'd come back and be like, oh, that was kind of wild. And yeah, I would just practice the visualizing and like going to different places. And in the moment, it was like, oh, I'm just visualizing going there in my brain. And also another like really profound one was I would imagine, so I talked about the tree, going into the base of the tree. Another one would be I would like take a breath, and each breath I would take a step down these steps, and I would go down these steps, and then I'd go into a hallway with multiple doorways. And I would go in, and then intuitively I'd get to a door, and then I'd be like, okay, this is the one to open, and I'd open it, and something would be in there, and it would always be like a very deep experience that really helped a lot. like with that example, one of the deepest ones was after my mother died. I remember going down that hallway and opening that door, and my mother was there. And my mother and I were never really able to have conversations and talk. And it was the first time I was ever able to just like sit and have like a real conversation with my mother, and was able to like let a lot out and to really let go of a lot of things. And yeah, and then after that, like
You like
that
healed yourself
healed a lot.
through through would that be called like astral? What would that be called?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And so, and it's funny because I don't
That's amazing, man.
like, I want to start researching more into it, but I also don't want to have that moment of like having this experience and then thinking, what is this?
Yeah,
And then immediately
just
snapping
have
out
the
of it.
experience. Yeah, exactly.
But looking into stuff a little bit, I would kind of feel, yeah, like it could be astral projection, that type of stuff. But I know that it's done wonders in my life. And
My dad said stuff about dreams, like too. He's told me stuff about dreams where he's like talked to his mom in his dream, you know,
yeah,
or where she's come to him. Yo, there was a time where I went out one time. I was in Atlanta and I almost got in trouble. Like I think me and my friends were sneaking into clubs, and like I almost got in trouble. And then the next day, my dad said like he had his mom came to him in a dream and told him, or he had a dream that I got arrested by trying to sneak into a club.
mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, no, I don't do those type of things.
Yeah,
But I'm like, how would he know that? So like, I think when the brain, like when we go into a sleep state and the brain goes into that, whatever that state is where you're in a dream, where the veil is super thin and where you can see ghosts and like you have these sleep paralysis, like these type of things. I think that what you're doing is you can probably control that without going to sleep.
yeah, you go to
You
these
know,
really deep states.
and
Yeah,
that can probably happen again when you're disconnected, when you're super connected with nature, and then you can really go inward. Then you can start controlling these states of brain waves, and then you can like control like oh, I want to go here. You can start controlling things.
yeah, no,
It's crazy.
yeah, and it's really,
It's so crazy.
yeah, it's definitely powerful, because that's essentially what I'm doing now and doing with this land is creating a place where people can come, like artists come, and they can just like have no distractions and focus on their craft
Uh-huh.
100%. And it's like every artist, essentially to me, it's like art, or that thing that where you completely just let go and flow through. I feel like that's our connection to like quote unquote God. And so this place is all about like not making it like giant and like a well publicized thing. It's like it's all about creating a place where people can come, be safe, and just like go through that process. Because when I was doing it, it was very like I was able to do it because I was living in the forest. I had no bills. I had very little like I only had to think about like getting food for that day and didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a lot to think about. Later, I started learning how to just like catch all my food and harvest food, and that was a game changer. But it's really when you're in that place of like fully able to let go and you're not in fight or flight or survival mode, that's when real magic can really start to happen.
And
So,
I kind of understand what you're saying now with the Wi-Fi, because it's like the same way that we look for external validation with our friends, our family, and society. Some people, they can't sit with themselves.
yeah,
They don't know how to sit with themselves and not be bored. But that's the time when you go in and you learn these things.
yeah,
If you were doing stuff with people all the time and doing this, and you're always getting from there. But when you're able to sit back in the jungle or the forest or by the river, you're able to sit with yourself, and then you go inside of yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people don't do that,
yeah.
you know,
They're
at
afraid
all,
to do
ever,
that, yeah,
until they go to sleep.
yeah.
And then the
And
sleep,
even then, they're kind of
and
having
even
trouble
then
with
they're
it. They're
kind of
like,
having
"Fuck."
trouble with it. You don't remember your dreams. you're not tapped into yourself. You're all about the physical and what's going on out here instead of saying, all right, well, let me go in. And I think because you were away so long in the forest, and you were able to tap into yourself rather than getting the external. Like, this is all physical.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? You can learn about the physical, you can touch the physical, you can feel, but then there's a whole other world inside of yourself that you've tapped into, and that's very important, man. It's a good conversation.
Dude, it's important to know how to be on your own.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny because I've gone through periods where, like, there's a difference between being alone and experiencing solitude. Because when you're in solitude, like, you realize you're not alone.
You're not alone.
Like, this is all so alive. And it's funny to see the moments when I wasn't centered and I was kind of like stuck in the whole kind of like world and these different things. Like, when I'd be by myself, I'd feel alone. But it's really beautiful to be back to that place where when I'm by myself, I experience solitude, and it's really nice.
I mean, but even now,
Like,
you know, like, I'll be at home, or, you know, you always feel like you got to be in your motherfucking phone, man.
yeah,
You always feel like you got to be scrolling on Instagram, looking at other people's shit,
yeah,
advertisements popping up. You're never like going within. You're always like, oh, if I don't have my phone, I don't have internet, like, what am I going to do?
yeah,
You know, and then you never grow the opposite way within. You never learn yourself. So it's so interesting that you took time to do that, and you're learning things by just being in nature and being alone
yeah,
and just quieting your brain. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I realized this. Oh shit, I can do that. Well, fuck. Well, let me go further. Let me see how far I can go with that. Oh shit, well, I got a pain right there. Let me just close my eyes and see if I can push that out. Like, mentally, but then physically it's gone. Like, these things people don't learn. They're like, oh, I'm gonna go to the doctor.
yeah.
They don't sit with themselves and breathe and say, let me try to figure this out.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of alone time to probably do that. Whoever has that much alone time, bro?
yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Because we're in that place of not being content, so we're trying to build more.
Very interesting.
It's
Very
like
interesting.
when you have food, water, and you're not being rained on. Like, when I was living in the woods, I didn't always have a roof. The only time I would get under something was if it was raining or snowing. So it's like, if you have food, water, you're able to fall asleep safely, and you have like close, like, because human interaction, that is one thing that I've learned, is that it is important to have like family.
Somewhat, yeah, it's important.
And like people that you can connect with. And I keep telling myself that, but it's also like that whole, yeah, the idea of being like a hermit in the forest completely alone is also a very appealing thing for me. But I gotta like shy away from that, and like, because I feel like we're at a place where it's important to learn to connect with each other.
Well, I mean, you know, it's a part of your job. See what I'm saying? Like, the solitude came with profound knowledge. So now, like, for example, you're telling me this shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, fuck. You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, shit, man. Like, when you were just talking about the Wi-Fi, I'm like, bro, you need some Wi-Fi. But now I'm like, fuck, not having the Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
You can learn.
Better connection.
Your better connection. You see what I'm saying? So, like, now I'm talking to you about this, and this type of shit is so cool. Like, I almost teared up several times because it's so cool to me. So then when you talk to other people, you realize that this is where this led you to be like, with me, you're talking to me about this shit. And I'm like, yo, this is crazy. You know what I'm saying? And the first thing I think about is my son. I'm like, yo, you know, now, like, I can bring my son around people that can learn about these things that are super, like almost like extraordinary, but we all have these things. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And the Indians and the tribes in Africa and all these people, they had these things, but then we just got flipped and fucked around. You know what I'm saying? So now we're like trying to find happiness. We're trying to find all these things, but, you know, the next generation now, because of this knowledge, can be better, you know, tapped in better and like do different things because of this stuff. You know,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's pretty. We're at a really fascinating time in history, and I feel like we've had multiple eras where we've been way more advanced. We've been like tapped in, and it's been, yeah, like everything has cycles. A plant will grow, do amazing, and then it'll die.
Hmm.
That's just how things are. There will be time periods where like kind of the world will be more enlightened. There will be periods of darkness and like kind of people being lost, and it's just, I don't know. The older that I'm getting, the more I'm starting to learn that it's like you don't have to control shit. Like when you just let go, like a lot of magic really happens. Like when I was doing the rock star world and like really pushing to like do that, like it was a lot of momentum but not getting anywhere.
Hmm.
It's like when I started getting into this world of kind of just the sound healing world, like it literally is all just fell in my lap. Like I got my first flute, I was at a stoplight. I think I told you this story where I was at a stoplight and this guy that I very, very lightly knew, he was a drummer and he knew I played guitar and sang, but he just came up to my van and he's like, and I'm like, oh, I'm at a stoplight, but yeah,
Yeah.
roll down the window, and he's like, hey man, it's the California Condor, treat it with love, and just passes this flute through my window, and I'm like, cool, thanks, man, and like
That's
then the
crazy.
light turns green, and I'm like, well, I gotta go, like, all right, peace, and I tried playing it a couple times, but never even thought about it for fucking years, like literally, yeah, like probably like 10 years later I started playing this flute, and all of these different things, it was kind of like preparing me to be in the state to be able to do what I do now.
Uh-huh.
Like I just finished my first tour ever, and I wanted to tour for years and tried to do it with my like bands and
Uh-huh.
stuff, and it just never, like when I was
Never worked out.
pushing,
Yeah.
it never worked out. But now when I'm like getting in the flow of like all of this and just kind of getting out of the way a little bit, all of these amazing things have been popping up. And it's really just realizing that like nature's got it. It's been doing this shit for a long,
Yeah. Long
long
time.
fucking time.
It's
And we're
technology.
kind of like that like toddler, that like the youth that's kind of like, oh wait, no, no, come on, like we had to do it like
Yeah.
this. Now I know how to do this, where like our parent is watching us struggle to get the shoe on. But sometimes you just gotta let a child struggle to learn.
For
And it's
sure.
like, no matter what, like this planet, this is gonna be here.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, we're struggling kids and we're trying to figure
We're
it
trying
out.
to learn.
And it's
We're trying to
really,
learn.
yeah, it's fascinating
It's
because that's where the
fascinating.
whole concept of what I do is, I call it ancestral sound journeys. And it's not like, for me, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna tap into my Scotch Irish roots and gonna tap into my ancestors. Like,
Yeah.
no, it's not like our human ancestors. It's our ancestors, like even deeper.
For
There's
sure.
the concept that many indigenous cultures consider the plants and the animals to be our older brothers and
For
sisters.
sure.
And it's like they've got it going on. They're living in cycles, and it's really like everything is reused. It all like comes and goes, and it has its place.
It's crazy,
Nothing is
man.
really like wasted in
No,
nature.
for sure not.
And when humans come and we like disrupt that rhythm, then it changes shit up. And yeah, like it's, and that's kind of the beauty too, is that really learning, and some people might disagree with me, and that's okay. People can disagree.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm starting to realize is that, for me at least, and maybe it's just like because I like went through a lot and like kind of was always trying to help people, but now I'm at a place where it's like, it's not really, yeah, it's kind of like we were talking about. If you're pushing and trying to make something happen, it's not going to work. If you're going out and being like, yo, man, wake up, like,
Yeah.
fucking do that,
It
how
has to
can
be
you not
organic.
see this?
Yeah.
Like, not shit's going to happen. It's only when somebody's like, yo, I got a podcast and fucking like, can I come out to your land and let's talk, that
Yeah.
like people actually want to like hear and receive things, and that it's like, yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
man.
when you're content and you've realized that you're like an internal being and that everything you need is right here, like that's a hard thing to control.
For sure.
And it's like, that's real freedom.
That's real
And it's
freedom, bro.
like, and we walked around on the land and like it's all very beautiful, and I'm very intrigued to do this experience of like gardening and doing agriculture and also doing art, because I'm kind of like you, like kind of the 80-20. Like 80 is like really deep into this one thing, and then 20% of still like, oh, I like my electric, being able to use my looper and guitar and
Yeah,
these
for sure.
things and all this stuff.
I mean, it's the world we live in. You know, it's
Yeah,
cool to.
it's the
I
world we
mean,
live in. Yeah,
there's technology that we can use to enhance our experience.
but I definitely, remembering that time period when I was living in nature and had no phone and all of these different things, I'm very well aware that somebody that's living in the city will not immediately go to that.
Yeah. No,
And
that's like a straight
yeah,
inverse right there.
it's kind of like too much of a shock
It
and
is.
more than you can expect
It
of
is.
someone. But, and that's kind of what, like, this kind of just came to me right now, is that for me, like, I feel like I'm happiest when I'm just living in the forest. Like, I kind of feel like I'm setting up this place to where it can be that bridge where people can go deeper into nature,
For sure.
because it's very, very appealing to me. I just love that concept of like the person walking into the forest and like never being seen again, and just kind of, there's an amazing Herman Hesse story. And that's kind of a good way to like wrap all of this up, because I know we both have
Yeah.
things that we're doing. But there's this Herman Hesse story, I believe it's called Iris. And it's all about this young boy, and he grows up playing in his mother's garden. And there are these particular flowers that he like just loved so much. And he had so much joy as a child, and all this magic, and seeing the caterpillars and all these things and watching all the birds. And then later he gets older and he forgets about all of that. And he goes through the world, and then he gets older, he ends up getting like a partner, and he gets a good job and has a house and all of these things, and he kind of forgets all about that magic that he experienced, until he then starts to reach a really hard period in his life, and he like did the world, and there's this moment where he sees this flower, and it starts to reawaken something in him, and he reaches a point where I believe he like loses like his relationship and his home and all these different things, because that's the thing, this world that we create, like it's a very fragile illusion that we've created, like all of our houses, all these things, it's all very, it can be going like that.
Yeah.
And after losing these things in this moment of despair and going through that like darkness, and him like seeing this flower and can't remembering, but it awakening something inside of him, and then he starts to remember that it's like, oh, that was that flower that evoked so much joy when I was a small child. And then he started remembering that world of the birds and the caterpillars and all of these things, and that magic that was very real, that he could just feel, and that he lost it and got stuck in that like never ending cycle, that hamster wheel, all
Yeah.
those wheels that are created for us. And there's that moment in the book where he returns to that magic, and he just walks into the forest, and there's this image of just like this kind of like portal opening, and him just like walking through it, and it closing behind him, and him becoming one with nature, and kind of returning to that magic and realizing that like this is just a temporary thing.
Yeah.
That what is guiding this vessel is much deeper and is an eternal thing, and there's no need to live in that place of fear and all of that stuff. And so yeah, like
this is actually the limitation of us.
Yeah,
the body is the limitation, and what's inside is like, you know, the thing that is really pushing the soul.
Well, that's the beautiful thing too, is that we came here to have these bodies and to go through this experience. Like I love that concept of the word earth, EARTH. You take the H off the end and put it on the beginning, it spells the word heart.
Yeah.
And people say this is the realm we come to work on our hearts.
For sure.
And
the heart's where love is. And love is the answer.
Love is the answer. Get all those products on the Fresh New website.
Yo, nice talk, man.
Yeah,
nice
man.
talk.
Yeah,
nice talk. For
good
sure.
chatting.
I'm going to chat with you more. I want to talk more another time, because I know we got things to do.
Yeah,
but yo,
come out here and just kick it and bring your
sure,
baby and
bro.
the family.
No
and
doubt.
Just do some sculpting and get off of the phone and just like.
For sure, man.
Read a book.
Nice discussion,
paint,
bro.
Just do things. So much love.
Yo,
man.
great, man. Great conversation. That was so interesting. Oh, that was better than the first one.
Yeah, man.
Shit.